Welcome to the Azcende Dialogue, where we talk all things national security, geopolitics, technology, and I'm really keen to get into our conversation because it's a little bit different to what I normally talk about. Adjacent, I think there's it runs sort of in parallel. So I'm keen to get into it, but rather than like butcher your bio or whatever, I'll hand it over to you. Tell me a little bit about yourself,
Sure.
or tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and Panoptic Systems.
Thanks, Laney. Myself, I was born and raised in the Northern Territory, Darwin. Grew up there for the better part of my life. Did a fair bit of travel as a young man, and then joined the police for 2006 and volunteered to go straight out bush. I love the territory. I'm a bush boy at heart, and I went out to Tennant Creek, which is approximately 1,000 kilometres from anywhere in the world, and and started my policing career out there, which was fantastic. It's the absolute initiation by fire. I got through general duties and survived, met my now current beautiful wife in Tennant Creek as well, and we moved back to the north of the Northern Territory in Darwin, and did a little bit of time in specialist sections with policing, went and did some covert undercover work. Was trained up by some people in New South Wales that came up and launched our inaugural covert section that kicked off up there. Left that and went into tactical policing. So in Australia, there's a tactical police group, or police tactical group, I should call it by its real name, per state and territory. And that's funded under the Australian New Zealand Counter-Terrorism Committee's requirement to have a minimum staffing for a CT capability domestically, which comes as a result of, I believe it was the Hilton bombings from the original COAG meetings in the 70s. Anyway, did that for a fair while, ended up being involved in some critical incidents, which, they aren't the reason you get the rewards, but when you demonstrate that you can perform well under pressure, it's recognised in those sections because people need to be able to work well under pressure in highly volatile environments. Was tapped on the shoulder and sent off to do the National Skills Enhancement course for dignitary protection, which is under the same framework for the Australian New Zealand Counter-Terrorism Committee, and lends itself to all of the internationally recognised protected persons that need protection coming into Australia. So I ended up doing protection on, heads of state, chief financial controllers for countries, royalty, visiting guests of government. And then 2017, stepped aside, went across to Panoptic Solutions. So left government and went to the .com space. And it was a bit of an odd transition because I'd never been in private security. I think most police in that tactical environment sort of, I think without knowing any better, generally look down on anyone that uses the word security in their profession. Just because policing is seen as that sort of first line response, and then security is a second line response. So it's not a status thing so much as a who's in charge of an incident, I guess. So come across, and that was sort of quite an eye-opening experience because we got involved in a high-level sporting event in Brisbane with a very famous boxer that came across. Did the protection for that, realised that I was pretty suited to it, that I enjoyed it. And then have been with Panoptic on and off since 2017 doing ultra-high net worth executive protection through Southeast Asia and the Pacific. We also approach executive protection from a medical standpoint as well. So recognising that a lot of our principles aren't just susceptible to integrity, safety, personal security breaches, but also there's a risk to their health with the activities they engage in. So
hence the first aid kit behind you there?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so you're asking me. So I have actually been relegated to the storeroom because no one likes the sound of my voice when I keep crackling on in podcasts. But this is actually our flyaway kit for some of the adventurous stuff that we go and do through Australia and the Asia Pacific. So we have a team of paramedics doctors, nurses that go away with clients. And we take some really high quality, good stuff.
And you operate not only here in Australia when you have dignitaries, high value, principals visiting, but you also operate overseas as well. I think you've said previously.
Yeah, correct, mate. Look, the remit, we try and stay in our lane, which is a bit of an odd thing to say because most, I guess, people that do this job could take their skill set anywhere, but we try and focus with Panoptic Solutions to stay inside the Asia Pacific region. So we work from Japan down the coastline all the way through to Indonesia and the archipelago, coming out to Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, the Pacific Islands. We try not to veer too far left and too far right outside of Asia.
Well, I mean, look, there's plenty to do in our region, isn't there?
Absolutely. I'm at Papua New Guinea, right across the water, and probably one of the busiest locations for what's happening in the world right now with executive protection and foreign national interests.
Yep. Well, look, let's delve a bit, and thank you for the background. Let's delve a little bit into the industry you're in, which is that corporate executive protection. I've had a very little bit to do with it in previous consulting gigs that I've done, where you've done this cyber security for like the G20 and the security for high dignitaries like Obama down. I think he was staying down at the Stanford, etc. In terms of helping his team sort of sweep and whatnot through there. But even before then, and this is a bit of a funny story, but back in the day, we're talking like early mid-90s, I was doing martial arts with this Australian group called the Bob Jones Corporation. And they're a bunch of meatheads, right? Their claim to fame was originally they were sort of the biggest corporate protection firm back in those days, doing like security for like Jimmy Barnes, Stevie, all these, visiting singers, etc. So, being a young black belt, they needed, young, dumb sort of muscle to stand on stages and sort of deter people from jumping up on stage. Sure. And literally back then, the remit was basically, if someone jumps on stage, you smash them. That's it. It's like, yep, okay. So we did that and did it well.
well, mate, nothing much has changed except maybe the terminology. And we would probably more politically correctly say we'd just NutriBullet them rather than than smash them. But
so tell us about the industry as such. I mean, I'm sure a lot has come and has moved in 30 years. And there's just a lot more, I guess, visibility and awareness of personal security issues, especially if you're a dignitary, a high net worth, ultra high net worth individual. So tell us a little bit about your industry and what's happening.
For the most part, I think the majority of protection in Australia is seen as A-listers, celebrities, personalities. There are a very few private protection teams that are engaged full time. The Jewish community has some schools. There's fantastic teams because they come from incredible backgrounds and training. There's a couple of ultra high net worth Australian business people that have got full-time security teams, residential programs. So a lot of these families or family office setups will have multiple residences in a compound, and they will have a full residential security team. So people patrolling the property, access control, so on and so forth. The executive protection industry in Australia is minuscule in comparison to what exists overseas. You think Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, over into
our own neighborhood, like in our own Asia Pacific neighborhood.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, what I've realized about Australia in this space is that we're much more focused on safety than we are on security.
Yes,
and
agree.
I think because although we import a lot of our own domestic threats with our policies around immigration, for the most part, there isn't a lot of access to firearms. IEDs and improvised options are heavily monitored and managed through technology, through a lot of listening devices, through a lot of information scraping, through the great work that the intelligence organizations that we've got here and foreign do to manage the threats at home. The EP industry is probably more around contingent contracts for the most part. So if events, you've got a workforce coming over from overseas, for instance, you might have a board meeting and the board's coming in and they need an executive protection team. For the most part, Australian executives are utilising executive drivers, transfers, black card services, there's no recognition because the threat level is so much lower. If you were to go, I just came back from the United States. I was at the EP Squared conference, which is they are the Board of Executive Protection Professionals, and they're currently writing the standard on executive protection in the United States for the private industry. That one of the case examples that they utilized during the presentations was a bank that had never had an executive protection program. They had security guards, as they normally would in the States, and then they had an active arm offender come on site and commit, a number of atrocities against the staff. They were a fixated person with mental health issues, which I think, you could probably speak to quite strongly, Lani, with your background and training.
I thought you were going to say I've got mental health issues.
Yeah, you obviously do. You've got me on your podcast, mate. But no, I'm sort of more referring to your psych background. And then it explodes. An EP program's born for that organization because of a single fixated individual makes them rapidly aware of the risks around their life. Now, Australia has similar things happen, and we have a knee-jerk initial reaction, which then I think because of our laconic, laissez-faire nature, we're like, meh. It's, the person with the knife that was running around Sydney stabbing and murdering everyone that had a mental health issue. They're gone now, and we don't have to worry because the threat's over. Or, the guy in the Burke Street Mall with a motor vehicle with a mental health issue, he's gone now because he's been put away behind bars. But there's a complete lack, I think, of awareness around the effectiveness of security. And the reason I say effectiveness of security is because what we do with Panoptic Solutions, and this is the sizzle, we create time for executives. We get people from A to B without any interference, with no risk, and we make it seamless, smooth, and discreet. And if someone who is an ultra high net worth recognizes that they want an extra 2 hours in their day and they don't want to travel by car and get caught in traffic, then that's when they might come and talk to us, because they want a solution that provides a more effective capability to deliver what they do.
Well, and it's interesting what you said about the threat or the risk, right? Which I think has been really exacerbated by social media. A lot more people get on and get radicalized and, get really angry about something someone else has written, etc., and then decide they, may have mental health issues and decide they need to go out and do something about it. I've seen that happen in the US, maybe not here in Australia so much, but I completely agree with you in terms of Australia's, I call it she'll be right attitude.
Yep.
And I saw this in the area that I sort of specialize in cybersecurity. We had spent 15 odd years trying to educate, raise awareness, especially amongst boards, about the importance of it. And it took almost 20 years for the worm to turn. But a lot of it was due to the that big breach, the Target breach in 2001. Yeah, that happened in the US. Won't happen here. We're all the way down this end of the world.
Yep. Yeah.
But it has finally turned, and a lot more people are taking more notice. It's on the top tier of the risk registers of boards, etc. Even for not-for-profit boards. So it took a while, and I think it'd probably be similar in your industry, right?
Of course. And what's it driven by? Our industry is driven by the same thing yours is, and that's taxes and turnover, right?
Yeah.
If you've got a corporate risk to your board of a cybersecurity attack that's going to cause you millions and millions of dollars of damage, let alone the wipe on the share price or the reputational harm and the industry experience, why not cover it? Why not deal with it? Like the preventative measure is so much better than the cure. And when it comes back to the taxes and turnover, I think the same thing applies for executive protection. And that is, in the States, a lot of EP programs are written off by the Fortune 500s as a tax cost, and it's all about increasing productivity. When you talk about...
that's interesting.
Well, I mean, I just made the mention of getting 2 hours back. If you've got someone on a multi-million-dollar salary and they're caught in traffic and they can't have the meeting that they need, and that costs the business millions of dollars because you as their EA or you're their chief of staff failed to put them in the right place at the right time because you didn't provide them the resources they needed.
Yeah.
If I'm the resource that person needs to be at the right place at the right time with a clear mind, and you're the chief of staff and not engaging me to make sure your principal and the money maker of your company, which is your CEO or CFO or CTO, is in the right meeting at the right place, then you're not good at your job, not them.
Exactly. The final thing I'll say on that, you talk about taxes and turnovers. I really think what the difference in the cyber industry, I mean, lots of things happened that sort of coalesced and sort of pushed it through. But I think the biggest influencer was the fact that boards were becoming obligated. ASIC were actually releasing,
Yep.
articles saying, yeah, we're going to look at you boards if something happens and we find out that you were negligent in your duties as a director, then you'll be fined X amount. And as soon as that happened, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like all of a sudden it's like, security budgets are increased, they're buying services, buying products, etc. So yeah, and it sounds like unfortunately, it sounds like it'll either be an incident or something where, regulators step in and go, look, if you don't take, corporate security, executive security seriously, board directors, you will be liable, in some way.
Yeah, and you bang on, Lani. You made mention before about personnel being a risk, and one of the things that you sent me before we started this was where do I see corporate security, executive protection in the next 25 years?
Yeah.
And I think it goes similarly to what you were talking about. And my thoughts are insider threats.
Yes.
I think it'll be insider threats due to distracted and ignorant workforce that fail to gain insight or knowledge about what their responsibilities are. So I think the biggest risk to companies is going to be, especially in your space, someone who's on their phone not realizing that they're accessing certain protected areas or restricted areas, that they're opening up an information data highway into, a protected space because they've got their Wi-Fi turned on, and when they walk through and they gather the public Wi-Fi, I don't know, that a nefarious actor was trying to utilize and leverage, they've now exposed their business because they just want to be able to check their TikTok feed or their whatever app feed inside a protected zone. And I genuinely think it's going to be ignorant insiders.
Look, and in the cyber world, in terms of breaches, a lot of the times that's how it happens, right? So if you're a threat actor trying to knock on the door, like metaphorically trying to knock on the door of a big bank in terms of trying to test the defenses and sort of break through that way, hard thing to do, right? But if you target, like, let's say an engineer who takes their laptop home, etc., on TikTok, whatever it is, if you're able to infect their machine, they bring it back in, they plug in, etc. As an attacker, you get in, you elevate privileges, you try and move laterally. It's a tried and true method, and you're right. And most of the time, it's it's not an insider threat as traditionally we'd come to understand it, but it's just ignorance. Yeah.
You don't rob the bank the day it opens. You rob it the night before by kidnapping the bank manager's wife, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You just kidnap the bank manager's computer these days.
Yeah.
The tactics haven't changed. It's just the methodology and execution that's changed.
Anyway.
Anyway.
You guys, Panoptic Solutions are one of the 2 or 3 largest sort of executive security companies in Australia. Take me through in terms of how does it, like, let's say a ultra high net worth individual is visiting for 2 weeks, right? So their advanced team or their people contact you a couple of months out, etc. What happens from there? Like in terms of how do you get engaged? How do you then sort of come onto the engagement, etc. And then where do you roll off?
I'm sure this is after the 4 months of conversations between lawyers and non-disclosures and legal. We finally get to the operational side of things, and it's usually spending time with the chief of staff or the EA, getting the run sheet that's required, and then it's just an iterative process, the same as we do in dignitary protection. Advancing locations, running routes, vetting personnel, vetting people at the locations, backgrounding the team that we're going to put in place to support the principal, building the relationship with the principal's team that's coming over, and then executing on the day with a discreet, high integrity service that is focused on really, really smooth movements. And that comes down to that time prior to the principal arriving, going through the planning process. And when I was talking about the ANZ CDC skills enhancement course for dignitary protection, we didn't go out and go to the boxing ring and start knuckling on. We sat in a classroom with the people that ran the G20. We had Big Bad Barry from Queensland, from the Queensland Police Dignitary Protection Team, run us through how G20 was put together. We spent a week on just planning, and that is at the top level of executive protection for CEOs in Fortune 500s, ultra high net worths, family offices, royalty,
Mm.
pick any person that wants it.
Mm.
It's not about having a 6'4"
Yeah.
NutriBullet standing beside you. It's
Mm-hmm.
about all of the planning being done prior to, so that that
Mm-hmm.
principal is never exposed
Yeah.
to a threat. And if they
So
are, it's the
yeah.
most minimal window.
So it really is around preventative, like you want to prevent incidents or prevent friction. It's not about waiting for something to happen and then stepping in and taking action.
Absolutely.
Mm.
There is an element of that, though. You know, I had
Yeah.
a principal in Sydney. They were there in January 2022, and we were moving this principal around. They had some high-end engagements with Australian government officials. They were doing recreational activity. The paparazzi are around non-stop. And so it gets to the point where there is a meet to meet, and you meet
Mm-hmm.
in the middle somewhere. You've
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
have that sort of person-to-person effect. For the most part, though, it's all about ensuring they've just got a smooth transition in life, that they never even see that you're there. For the most part, we generally tend to like guys that have got some sort of background. I should say operators, not guys, because we're open, right? We like operators that have got some background or understanding around covert surveillance,
Mm.
protective surveillance, because a lot of what it is understanding the principles of elasticity, movement,
Mm-hmm.
blending in, not branding out. I think a lot of people look at bodyguards per se, and they go,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're going to have, a 511 backpack, you're going to have some Molly
Yeah.
on your shoulder, you're going to have
Mm-hmm.
some sort of, I don't know, G-Shock watch and Oakley sunglasses, because they
Mm-hmm.
get
Yeah.
caught up in the idea of whatever it is that Hollywood's produced.
It
But
only happens in the movies, right?
movies and bad details. Yeah. If you
Mm.
if you see someone that looks like I call them tactical toms. If you've got a tactical tom on your job,
Yeah. Yeah.
you've picked the wrong team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and I guess you guys must do some sort of risk assessment on the principle beforehand in terms of what sort of controls that you're going to put in place, etc. How does that work? And does technology, I guess this is
Yeah.
the
This
sort of the
is the
lead
blend into
into
tech.
tech. How
Absolutely.
do you guys do like dark web searches? Do you do, searches of social media to see what sort of threats, what sort of,
Yeah, we do. And this is exactly where technology becomes the most powerful tool in our toolbox.
Hmm.
It's no longer firearms that provide us the most capability.
Wow, okay.
It's all about technology, because if you know the threat exists and you can not be where the threat is, you've won the fight.
Yes.
You don't need
Yeah.
the firearm.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that is what we aim to do with technology. So a couple of tools that we use, and I'm happy to just spread the word on them.
Mm.
Samdesk is one of the most disruptive technologies and partners that any business in this space, security, risk management, like if you're managing assets and you're a facilities manager and you don't have Samdesk giving you alerts on,
Samdesk. Yeah.
Samdesk. If you don't have Samdesk, look at it. They will literally provide you active alerts on where all of your facilities are. So you don't even
Wow.
need to be me to have this capability. You could just have real-time scraped AI analyst blended mix information
Mhm. Mhm.
provided moment to moment to your phone. And I actually prefer the phone setup on Samdesk than I do on my desktop.
Yeah.
We we do, and there's a number of apps out there.
Mhm.
I like the guys at Samdesk. I
Yeah.
like the tool. I've used it. I find it amazing. I've used it on ultra high net worth protection details. It works.
Mhm.
Another one that we've used, which is making, interestingly, this tool's making its way into real estate and lone worker space for drivers and safety. And it's
Mhm.
a company out of Canada called My eForce, and they do
Okay.
tracking based off an app, any sort of your
Mm.
smartwatches, but they partner most primarily with Apple, and
Mhm.
they will do heart rate, trip, fall, slip
Okay.
notifications
Yeah.
if you've got a medical emergency. But the
Mm.
benefit of them is that they lead that back to a control center, and the
Yes.
control center can then let someone else know. Because it's all well and good if you are wearing your watch and your watch tells you that you've fallen over, cracked your head, and your
Yes.
O2
Yeah.
has dropped, and now you don't have consciousness.
Mm.
But what does
Mm.
that do?
Yeah. Yeah.
What I like about my eForce is they're a tool that provides you real-time intel on what's happening to your team. So we use that for our guys in the field too, right? Because a lot of
As
the time,
well.
if we've got
Okay.
a field team, we
Yeah.
might have an advanced member that's out ahead of the principal. And if they
Yes.
get involved in a conflict, their heart rate spikes, or they have an emergency and they can't hit their
Wow.
watch, then
Yeah.
we can at least know what's going on ahead of time.
Yeah.
So now we're tech enabled. We're force
Wow.
multiplied
That's
because we're
interesting.
utilizing real-time
Mm.
technology to place it in the field and
Mm.
deliver that information back to our team. The principal will never even be involved in a
Yeah.
conflict because we are so well informed
Yeah.
prior to them leaving where they are. So
Well, and what I find interesting is that you haven't had to build or purchase, specific hardware, right? You're using just off the shelf, Apple Watches or whatever it is to. It's just
totally.
that they're sort of networked and monitored.
Yep. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the team that you be recruiting for a consulting thing, Lani.
Hmm.
If you want really good people, you want them now and you want them with what they come with when you're
Yep.
recruiting. If it's a
Yeah.
contingent task, you
Hmm.
don't want to have to go out and outfit them with, this $1,400
Yeah.
torch because they're going on a boat. You want to be able to say, okay, I need Ben because he is a good operator and I know that
Yeah.
he's going to be coming with his own tools and he's enabled. All I have to do
Yeah.
is
Got
link
it.
him in with these products.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think that's probably the future of tech with our space. It's not giving
Yeah.
people high-end equipment. It's giving them
Yes.
high-end capability with
Yeah. Interesting.
interoperable deployed devices.
Mm. Fantastic. And then obviously once the engagement is complete, you roll off it. Do you do some sort of post incident review and then take your learnings and then roll off to the next engagement?
Yeah, yeah, you sound like one of my old sergeants. Yeah, we run the after action reports. So
Yes.
after every task, depending on the size, if we're talking about like a secure driving movement with 2 to 3 moving pieces, and we might not
Yeah.
spend the energy and the investment in doing an AAR because
Hmm.
we've done them to death.
Yeah.
Um, Big tasks, for instance, like 100-person move through the Philippines with a recreational white boat process,
Mm.
armed deployments, liaising with foreign law enforcement and military units, we would
Okay.
absolutely do an AAR. And I think this is where we stand apart from the crowd, is that we take all these tier one skill sets, not,
Yes.
and I don't mean the physically deployed skill sets. I'm talking about the
Hmm.
operational planning ones,
Hmm.
and we then link those up with foreign national assets and teams that we know are going to provide best in industry service through
Wow. Okay.
Indonesia,
Yeah.
Philippines, Papua New Guinea, anywhere up
Hmm.
and down the coast. We link back to people that have got similar backgrounds to us, and that
Mm.
comes from the fact that we are those people, so we speak the same
Yes.
language.
Yeah. Well, I mean, out of interest, so let's say you're deployed overseas, somewhere in the Asia Pacific region.
Yep.
What do you do from a law enforcement? Let's say something happens, you get in trouble. Well, not in trouble, but law enforcement in that country is engaged. Where are you left? What are your rights? I'm assuming you're just another foreign national in a country that's been caught up in something. So
Yeah, correct. It's a really sticky situation that none of us want to get caught in,
yeah.
because you are a foreign national involved in what could potentially be, exigent dynamic circumstances that you've got no
Mm.
control over.
Yeah.
And in that instance, standard Australian procedure: get in touch with DFAT, get to the
Yeah.
embassy,
Hmm.
seek legal counsel, look after yourself, don't talk to anyone, don't make any admissions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look to secure your own personal safety first, and then
Hmm.
deal with the situation at hand. For the most part, like I said, we don't want to be in the firefight in the first place.
Mm.
We've
Mm.
completely failed. Our three key critical things that we talk about from a hard skills delivery in the field is
Hmm.
communicate, cover,
Hmm.
and extract. And if we are in a contact for whatever reason, because we might be in a semi or a non-permissive environment, say
Mm.
highlands of
Mm.
Papua New Guinea,
Hmm.
communicate. We're in a contact. If I'm looking after your principal, Lani, I'm letting you know that I'm in a contact.
Mm. Mm.
Cover the principal, get them out of there, and extract yourself away from the situation. We're
Hmm.
not. We're no longer the guys that are looking for the firefight. We're not out there to.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
mission for us is not to advance the battlefield. It is
Hmm.
to get out of there as fast as we can,
Yes.
as safely
Hmm.
with the principal.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a sticky situation that no one wants to find themselves in, and
Yeah.
and it happens.
Yeah. And very interesting. Now, last question I had was, I can't believe this was like 5 weeks ago, but this is the assassination attempt on
Yeah,
President Trump, right? And
yeah,
while the details are still emerging in terms of what actually happened, from your perspective, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but from as a professional in the space, right? What do you think went wrong? What could have gone better in terms of, because to me it just seems like the shooter, it was so easy for him to, it was a 20-year-old kid with a AR-15, modified scopes, etc. But to
yeah,
me, it seems so simple and so easy how he got so close to someone like
yeah.
that.
Without trying to throw anyone under the bus. We've had a few conversations with some partners and friends that we've got over in the States, and they come from the circles that would be around the president at different times, and from a protection space, not anything else. And what it sounds like is it's a communication follow-up error. The planning was there. The team were doing their job. Everyone was trained and had the skill sets. What it sounds like from talking to different operators is that when the execution was underway of the protection task, and obviously this happened, there was no follow-up with personal responsibility. So you might have been designated to Area A, you were designated to Area B. Perhaps Area B collapsed their position and no one followed up to make sure that Area B was being executed properly.
Well, it's communicate, right? This the whole communicate thing.
Goes back to communicate, cover, extract. So where it went wrong, follow up. What I think the problem is prior to is a focus on mediocrity over merit. And I think that's going throughout society. And the more we see mediocrity promoted for the sake of it, as opposed to this is a no shitter. You're talking about a life and death situation. And
absolutely.
This principal was shot in the ear, which is millimeters from his brain. And that's the end of the game. This isn't a mediocrity space. And I think when people promote based on mediocrity, and if, this is, like I said, this is no shitter. This is real world. The results are life and death. This is what can happen when you've got mediocrity promoted into those bad positions. And I think that's being witnessed categorically on whatever broadcast is happening at the moment around what's going on. And I guarantee it's the same in many, many industries where merit is gone by the wayside and mediocrity is being promoted.
No, I completely agree. It's not just limited to that incident. It's just that, like you said, right, that's life and death. And to me, it was more than just life and death, because had it been successful, there would have been a civil uproar in the US, in terms of just how partisan things are at the moment. It was, and it was literally millimeters. So it just, boggles the mind. But also, too, I mean, one thing I looked at was, looking at the different areas of responsibility. You have the Secret Service, state police, you've got local police, etc. I immediately thought, just again, communication, integration of different services, etc. Something must have fallen through the crack. But I completely agree. Mediocrity, under the guise of diversity, equity, inclusion, or whatever other. I think, unfortunately, meritocracy is on the wane, which is terrible in my view.
I totally agree, and I think that we're going to see in the next 10 to 20 years more and more meritocracy pushed out for mediocrity, and standards continue to fall, and the acceptance of poor form, poor execution, which is just, I mean, it's, in my mind, it's fantastic. I'm happy to be in the room and be competitive with anyone, because I believe in merit, and we recruit on merit. We recruit based around the culture of what we provide and where we've come from, and we expect people to operate and constantly raise the bar. You talk about, the integration of technology. We're constantly looking for different ways we can improve what we do, and that's what we want on our team. So,
fantastic. Well, look, last thing to ask you, what's the one biggest thing, or two biggest things that's going to happen in your industry over the next 5 to 10 years that you think will disrupt, or the new thing that will come out of your industry?
Oh, that's a good one. The two biggest things that are going to disrupt their industry. I think what the Board of Executive Protection Professionals at the moment is doing with writing the ANSI standards in America is one of the biggest things that could potentially happen when it's executed on, because back to taxes and turnover and insurance and costs, I believe that once they write that standard, it will spread internationally, that people will have to recognize.
Got it. Okay.
If the American standards of EP, who sort of somewhat lead the majority of the money flowing in and out of the industry, are set at a certain level, and that's what organizations expect, is that you abide by those standards, then I think that's going to have a flow-on consequence to the rest of the world. I think at the moment there's a massive discussion going on around standards within the industry, whether it's the United...
Is your industry regulated, like here in Australia, or...?
We've got... It's... it's regulated. Okay. States and territories have their own licensing and requirements. but there's no, I would say there's no standard.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
It's a pay for course that you can go and do, but there's
and
no
get your license and then you're in. Yeah.
Correct. I have in Australia the highest level of operational planning and physical skills execution training and education that you can get in executive protection or dignitary protection. There's no other course that I could go and do in Australia right now that would teach me anything more about the actual skills of dignitary protection, because I've done them at a police tactical group level. Maybe in the military there is like a hostile environment stuff, but in Australia for domestic permissive environment, I can't do anything more in the actual skill space. But I can get the same license with a certificate too as someone else that's got none of the qualifications, experience, history, skill sets as I do. And that's what I mean with no standards.
And this is where standards come in, right? So if an authoritative body like the one you're talking about releases a standard, then others must follow. Procurement, customer procurement will, ask for it if they're
exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So it's not really sexy, but I think it relates to the business of what we do.
Yeah. Awesome. Ben, thank you so much. That was a really interesting discussion. I'm sure we could talk for another hour or so, but I appreciate your time and thanks for coming on the Azcende Dialogue.
Oh, mate, been fantastic. Love that I finally get the chance to catch up with you, Lonnie.